All right, so Matthew chapter 18. This is the fourth of the five main discourses in the Gospel of Matthew. So there's a lot of Jesus' words here in chapter 18. And right off the bat, in this first section, we're going to see a continuation of the radical nature of the gospel and the kingdom that Jesus is establishing. Because it says in chapter 18 and verse 1, at that time the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And calling a child to him, he put him in the midst of them and said, "Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be drowned in the depth of the sea." So this is interesting for a number of reasons. One, the question is an interesting question. Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Why is that an interesting question? Because we think about it and it's like, oh, they shouldn't ask that. That's the wrong attitude. We just want to make it, But at the same time, what is your perception of the kingdom? What do you think it's like? What do you think heaven is like? What would you relate that to? Think maybe back to the Old Testament, and you talk about David, right? And he's got his mighty men. And we get little, pithy statements about a lot of the mighty men of David. And it's like, that's pretty cool. Like, these are the ones that are like there with him. What's the name of the guy who says that he wrestled a lion in the pit on a cold day or something like that? It's like these mighty men who did incredible things. And it's like, yeah, those are the great ones, the mighty men of David. And you think about any sort of administration or kingdom, and it's like, who are the ones that are supporting the throne, who are right there, that are in the thick of it, right? And it's like we want to know those things. We want to be a part of that, right? When they give, some team wins the Super Bowl, all the staff get honored, with their own, I don't know if everybody gets a ring, but everybody in the building gets some sort of honor, or they're all part of that, right? The last guy on the bench just as much as the star player, because it's a team effort. So it's like, who's a part of the team? Who's a part of the organization? Who's a part of the kingdom? And within the kingdom, who's in the inner circle? We want to be there with you, Jesus. We want to be the greatest in this kingdom. We want to be right there with you. And so it's easy for us to jump all over them and think that their motives are impure and that they're wrong and doing things the wrong way. But it's kind of a natural question, right? How do I get to be one of those people that's right there with you, that gets to be a part of the team? How do I make the cut? How do I be in the inner circle? How do I do these things? And along with that, yeah, sure, they're thinking about honor maybe that comes along with it. But it's a reasonable question, and it's the way that we think. How do we get to be a part of the leadership team at work? How do we get to be a part of those that are the decision makers or whatever else? We want to know. We want those things. And so they're thinking in a very normal, I think, sort of terms. And Jesus gives them a very abnormal answer, because there's not a context that I can imagine in which this answer fits other than the kingdom of heaven. I can't think of a political movement. I can't think of an organization. I can't think of a kingdom in which this answer fits other than the kingdom of heaven. Because what Jesus says to them is he grabs a child and he brings the child in front of him and said, "Unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Can you all, and tell me if I'm wrong, can you all think of any other place in which this is the right answer to this kind of question? How do I attain leadership position? You go to your boss, you're like, "I'm ready for more work. What do I need to do?" And they're like, "You have to become like a little child." You'd be like, "That's nonsense, right? That's like voodoo, right? That's not the way that this works. You're trying to sound smart. You're trying to be overly clever." But this is the answer here, right? That unless you become like a little child. Because what does Jesus teach? He teaches two things, right? The first is the nature of the person that is, quote unquote, greatest in the kingdom. But even more so, he's teaching a lesson about the kingdom. What's the lesson about the kingdom that he's teaching?
Not about self-power.
Right. It's not about self-power. What is it to be great in the kingdom of heaven? What is he teaching greatness is? service, humility, sacrifice. Because what kind of leader is Jesus? All those things, right? And in fact, how do we define Jesus' leadership and the kingdom of heaven? By a cross, right? Like a shameful image that in any other context in the history of the world is the most shameful thing you could do to a human, right? You subdue them, strip them naked, and lift them up and watch, everybody can watch them die, right? Like it's the utmost in humiliation and powerlessness. And yet that's the very symbol that we have taken as Christians of the kingdom of heaven. Through the shame of the cross, he's resurrected. Through the shame of the cross, we are forgiven. It's humility. It's a complete reversal. And so, kind of going back, as I said, from the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is teaching us something different, right? Like a different way for the world to operate, a different perspective, a different way to see things. The world's changing. Not in the way that we think that it's going to change, or the way that we may want it to change, but in the way that it needed to change. And we've used this analogy before. How do you stop war by starting another war? Like there's like an inherent irony in that, right? And we say, well, the threat of war can help maybe subdue war, maybe for a while, right? But then, look at World War I, right? It takes the assassination of an archduke of a small country and the hubris of man, and next thing you know, you have the war to end all wars, right? But it wasn't actually, because then just a couple decades later, we had an even worse one. It's the nature of the world that there's going to be conflict, there's going to be embattling, there's going to be fighting, and you don't fix it by fighting more. Like maybe you can have a revolution and put to end all the killings, but that only lasts until the next revolution. And so Jesus isn't going to change the world by carrying a sword. He's going to change the world by doing something different and by showing a different kind of power to the world. And I think that's embodied perfectly here with this image of the little children. And what's shocking about this is, we could talk culturally, the way that children are viewed in a lot of cultures in the ancient world, that they have no real value until they come of age, right? The way that they are mistreated, maybe particularly daughters in the history of the world and those sorts of things. And we think that we're better, and maybe we are in some ways, right? But I can't tell you how many people have told me that they were going to have kids, but they weren't going to allow that to change their lifestyle. And you're like, why is that a bad thing? Like, why do you think that, you shouldn't change your lifestyle for your children? But it's this thing that, they're an inconvenience, Or I've heard people say, particularly men, well, I'm not a great dad with the babies. I'll be a better dad as they get older. And it's like an amazing thing, right? But it demonstrates this attitude, like a little child, we don't know what to do with them. They're not grown yet. They can't think yet. Their brain isn't fully developed. So it's we'll just wait, and then we'll deal with them once they're older. But until then, we just kind of feed them and let them play in the corner. And then once they get smart enough to have a conversation, then we'll, take them under our wing. Once they're old enough to apprentice me in the forge, right? Carry the hammer. That's when we care. Whatever sort of value system you have about that. And we're kind of the same way today if we're not careful. That we could say, oh, the kids, right? Now, I appreciate you all here. We've got the kids running around, and I've never seen any of you yell at the kids for being kids, which is great. But there are congregations and there are places where it's I do not want to hear a crying baby at church. And if the baby cries, even a whimper, you take them out because we don't want to hear that stuff here. And it's babies cry, why are we so punitive on parents and on children for existing? And it's the same attitude, I think, that Jesus is upending. That there's something incredibly valuable and innocent and pure and humble about kids that we need to learn from. That they have way more value than we're tempted to give them. And he's saying, unless you become like a child. And you're wait a second, but children can't even talk right? Leah, she says birthday. Well, kind of. She gets mad when I say birthday because she says, no, it's birthday. And I'm well, yeah, it's birthday. She's no, it's a birthday. Yeah. They can't talk right. And you want to be like that? Can't even say birthday right, Like that's the whole thing. We have this attitude towards kids. He says, no. That's the greatest. The ones that are like that have that kind of humility about them. And then he gives this kind of interesting point on top of that, right? What do you make of 5 and 6 here? The one who leads them astray. Is he talking literally about children? I mean, I think he's to some extent. But what's his bigger point here? Yeah. Yeah, the disenfranchised, the innocent, the humble, the cast-outs, those that are struggling, any of those that are seeking me. And we saw a little bit of this, even in the last chapter where they, not the last chapter, but a couple chapters ago. Actually, I'm getting confused. I was teaching Luke Wednesday night. But in Luke 18, with the little children being brought to Jesus, it's a similar sort of point, right? That they're like, no, we don't want the children here. Like, Jesus is too important. And he's saying the same thing about children that he's saying about any of those that you would otherwise be tempted to push away. Like, those aren't the kind of people we want here, right? For whatever various reason you define it. And he's like, anybody who does that, who pushes those people away, like, there's a cost to that. And as much as the kingdom is for all and is accepting, there are some things you just do not do. And one of the things you do not do is push away those that believe in God, those that are trying, those that are coming to him. You do not cast those off. It's better to have a millstone tied around your neck and thrown in the depth of the sea, which is a horrible way to kill somebody, to put somebody to death. It's a horrible image. And I don't think that Jesus is just being hyperbolic here, right? Now, he's not giving a command that this is what you do to those people. That's different. But he is saying it is like that. It is that serious of a thing. You'd be better off, right? Don't lead those astray. Any comments, questions, thoughts here? First 6 verses.
Little children, they're not concerned with power or being noticed or anything like that. Like we thought we went through who's the greatest. Kids aren't worried about being the greatest. They just want to be loved. They want to be taken care of, and they're innocent.
Leah is in kindergarten. She came home the other day, and one of her friends, she was really upset because she felt like one of her friends betrayed her. There was like a bug flying around, and the bug was coming near her friend. Her friend was like, no, get away. And then in Leah's mind, she made the bug bite Leah. I don't know if it was a mosquito or whatever. It wasn't a wasp. It wasn't like some serious thing. But she was like, she made it bite me. And she was really upset. Well, the next day she comes home and she says, I talked to her about it, and she apologized and I forgave her. And there's like, as you get older, like there's so many things about that story that are so different if you're older. And let's take out the bug biting her, being made to bite you. It can be any sort of offense that you've perceived to exist. The ability to actually confront it and to know that it hurts your feelings and being willing to admit that it hurts your feelings. Adults don't even want to admit to themselves that somebody hurt their feelings, first of all. But then to acknowledge it and be upset about it and go to the person and say, this really hurt my feelings is incredible, right? And it's even more incredible then for that person to say, oh, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean for that to happen. And then on top of that, it's even more extraordinary to come back and say, I forgive you. Like all of those sequence of events, that doesn't happen with adults very often, does it? Because of what Dickey's talking about, like the lack of innocence and the lack of humility. Like there's way too much pride, there's too much self-service, there's too much self-aggrandizing, and it all gets in the way of, that hurt my feelings. Oh, I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? Yes, I forgive you. David, and then we'll go back to James.
Well, I was just reminded of an interaction I had this week. A student came to me during morning tutoring. It was like, we were about to have a test. She was just, Mr. M, why do you like teaching? She was confused because she's frustrated with some of the students that were in there. And I tried to explain that, again, these are teenagers, so they're not completely innocent, but they are not jaded, they're not corrupt, and I said, it's fun to interact with you guys because you're learning life and experiencing things for the first time. Of course, I'm teaching math, and it's a struggle for them. And she's like, well, don't you get frustrated with your job sometimes? I was like, really? It's mostly my interactions with adults. My job.
Yeah.
I really don't. My best times are with the actual students. And so it just reminds me of this passage because that probably explains why I would rather be with them than be with bureaucracies that you see, or the frustration when I see somebody propagandizing or attempting to corrupt some of these lines, which unfortunately does happen in education.
Yeah, I mean, as part of that, though, I mean, I think that's a commendable attitude because the temptation is to be frustrated with them and to think, you don't know this already? And it's like without recognizing that they are growing and learning and developing. I mean, I realized that with my kids, like the first time Joanna skinned her knee or something and it was bleeding, she was so upset. It's like I've got scars all over my knees and elbows from how many times I've skinned them. And you're just like, it's not that big a deal. You're fine. It hurts a little bit. You'll be okay. Or like the first time they stub their toe and they think, and then it hit me. They've never stubbed their toe before. They don't know that it's going to hurt really, 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 really bad for like 2 minutes and then it goes away. They don't know that. They just know that it hurts really, really, really bad. And so then you're like, oh man, they're learning that stubbing your toe is horrible, but it doesn't last long. It's like the worst pain you can have for like 5 seconds, right? And it's like, they don't know that. And it's easy to forget that they don't know that and hold it against them. Yeah, James.
Jason was thinking about some of the qualities of children. I think there's 2 of us. I didn't hear all the comments clearly, but I'll just throw these out there. A couple things is, I remember my mother telling me that when me and my sister were young, one of the things she noticed about us is that children have an inherent tendency to want to please their parents, and that's a good thing, like picking up a plate off the floor, picking up your clothes off the floor. They want to show you that they've done something good. They want to please you. That inherent desire is there. But also, children have an inherent ability to trust adults and trust authority. And I think Jesus wants us to have an inherent quality to want to please Him and His Father. And He wants us to be inherently trusting Him. I think those are qualities of children that He's really hammering at here.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, both of those, the desire to please and the ability to trust almost implicitly, because they have to. There's a need. There's a dependency that exists there. So Jesus builds on this, and He says in verse 7, woe to the world for temptations to sin. For it is necessary that temptations come, but woe to the one by whom the temptation comes. And if your hand or your foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life crippled or lame than with 2 hands or 2 feet to be thrown into the eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than with 2 eyes to be thrown into the hell of fire. Here's the question. Does Jesus speak with hyperbole? Does He exaggerate? No, I don't think so. I don't think this is exaggeration at all. Is it better to go into hell with 2 hands or heaven with 1? Now, I don't think that what He's saying is go cut off your hand. I don't think He's saying pluck out your eye, because I think we all know that the sin that comes from the heart is not the problem of the eye. That would be to misappropriate the cause. But I do think that what He is saying is not an exaggeration. This is just the nature of things. And it's the same with the millstone around the neck and the sea. I don't think He's exaggerating the point at all. Now, whether He's telling you to cut your hand off is a different thing. He's heightening and showing the level and the degree to which this is a problem. Yeah, James.
Yeah, Jason, I don't think he's telling people you literally need to dismember yourself. I think if I could phrase it differently here, what He's saying is He's trying to illustrate with an extreme. You go to whatever extent necessary to stop committing sin, because sin separates you from God, and the consequence of that is not pretty. So whatever length you have to go to stop committing that sin.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And again, It's not a prescription for self-mutilation, because I think we can see that it's what comes out of a man that causes him to sin, right? Like that's the very point that he makes to the Pharisees about the Sabbath, about the clean and unclean, right? It's what comes out of the mouth of a man that causes him to sin, not what goes in. And it's the same true here with sin in general. But to say that he's exaggerating the point with the cutting off of the hand and the plucking out the eye, I don't think that's the right way to frame it. It is that serious of a thing. If that was the thing that saved you, then you do it. But that's not the thing that saves you, I think you would argue. And so I guess it depends on how you define exaggeration. But there is a dramatic nature to what he is saying that I think we need to take very seriously. Because it's easy to say, oh, it's hyperbolic. We don't really have to cut off our hands. Or like, look at the rich young ruler. Oh, he's being hyperbolic. You don't really have to sell all that you have and give to the poor. It's like, well, maybe not. Maybe that's not the real problem. But if that's the thing that can cause you to go to heaven, it is worth the cost. It is all worth the cost, I think, is the way that he's trying to frame that. Yeah, right.
I would just ask the question, is he being literal or figurative? And if you use those broader terms, maybe we're not nailed down to the hyperbole, but just the idea that there's reasons for this, and he's making a point by saying it this way.
Right. Yeah, certainly. And so, I mean, this whole section here, like heightening the cost of sin. But what's really interesting, I think that conversation is interesting, but what's really interesting is what he says in verse 7, isn't it? Because what does he say? Woe to the world for temptations to sin, for it is necessary that temptations come. That's fascinating, isn't it? Why is it necessary that temptations come? It's kind of the same thing, isn't it? Free will, choice, temptation.
It's like what Abraham said, now I know. Abraham standing with the knife.
Yeah.
Now I know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been demonstrated at that point. Yeah, Jane.
Well, Jason, I think it goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. Satan has made it clear, and we see it all through Scripture. He's got his plan. He's a conniver. He's a schemer. He's going to do what he's going to do. So temptation is going to come our way, one way or the other. So it's one of those, especially as people of faith, it's a reality. It's going to come our way, and we have to be prepared for it. And looking at this context here, especially 5 through 7, going back to our discussion on verse 6, when we look at what Paul wrote to the church at Corinth, there's no temptation that's overtaken man that we cannot overcome. God has provided the way out. It's going to come, but it's up to us to take the way out that he provides. And when we commit sin, it's because we didn't take the way of escape. Every time I've done something wrong, it's because I didn't take the way of escape. So there's a personal responsibility here that we have. We need to understand that it's going to come our way. We need to be armed with the Scripture to be prepared to meet it. And when that door exits there, we need to boldly go.
Right. I think that's a really important part of the conversation, is that temptation is not the same as obligation, right? Just because you are tempted doesn't mean that you have to give in to the temptation. And God has protected us there in that way. Because if you couldn't resist temptation, it would be the exact same as if you couldn't sin or couldn't be tempted at all, right? You end up with the same conundrum. Either you are obligated to sin and you can't be around God, or you can't sin because temptation doesn't exist, and then that completely undermines the entire purpose of the Bible and the creation of mankind, right? Why did God create us? And why did he put the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the garden? And I think the answer has to be because he wanted us to choose him. He wanted to have a people that chose to be with him. And throughout the entirety of the Bible, he protects free will for us, that we can choose him. Like, that's the thing that matters, is that we pursue him, which is why the New Testament talks so much about striving, right? Talks so much about desiring and seeking first the kingdom of heaven, and this pursuit and this directional language about who we're trying to be, because God wants us to seek him. And then, if we seek him, he can forgive us. He is filled in the gap through the blood of Jesus. And so temptation has to exist. Otherwise, there is no choice. There is no pursuit of God. There is no striving after him. And that's the thing that he wants. And that's the thing that he values, is a people that chooses to be with him, that wants to be with him. Now, of course, the problem with that and the cost of that is that there are people that do not choose to be with him. There are those that decide not to pursue God, that they don't value the world and the Creator and the things that he has given us. And there's a consequence to that too. You are cast away from him. And so you're cast away from his life and his goodness and his love and his kindness and his gentleness and the steadfastness and the things that define God, and you are cast away from him into the abyss, Hades, hell, whatever term you want to use. And so there is a cost. But the whole thing is that there has to be temptation because there has to be choice because he wants us to choose him, and he wants a people who is chosen to be with him, a people who value the things that God values. And that's significant because now it changes the way that we pursue life. It isn't just that we live morally because we're supposed to. We actually desire the moral life standard that God has given us. It's not that we don't lie because to lie would go to hell. Maybe that's the way we learn it, and as we grow and develop, we get to a point where we just hate lying because we love the truth, and we see the value of truth, and that becomes primary to who we are because we see the cost of lies and deception. And so that's the whole thing, and so temptation has to exist for that to exist, for us to be able to pursue God. And because of that, we do whatever we can to avoid temptation and to not give in to it because the cost is high. It's necessary for it to exist, but it's not necessary for us to give into it. And so he says, you do whatever you have to not sin, to not give in to those temptations. But I think it's fascinating that right after he talks about temptation and not giving into it, what does he talk about in verse 10? He gives a parable. See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of the one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly I say to you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that never went astray. So it is not the will of my Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. Because what's the whole thing? You sin, separated from God, consequence, right? But at the same time, the one of the 100 that wanders astray, what does God do? He eagerly pursues to bring him back. And so that's the beauty of the gospel, isn't it? Yes, there is a high bar that we are supposed to live up to, the standard of God and his moral nature, right? His holiness. And we seek that, and we don't give in to temptation because there's a cost. But the gospel says that doesn't mean that you're lost if you're lost. He's seeking to find you, right? It's not like you get one shot and once you've blown it, you've blown it. He is eagerly seeking the one that has been led astray. And that's the beauty of the kingdom that he's establishing, isn't it? And the two go hand in hand. There's a high cost to being lost, but that's why he is so eager to seek us and bring us back. And so you can't take the one without the other. Any comments, thoughts about that? So now we get the interesting part that I skipped over. Probably could get away with not having to talk about this, but we'll give it a shot. So in verse 10 and 11, there's this like little interlude here. So see to it that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. So their angels is interesting. I don't have a strong opinion on what that means, whether it's like a guardian angel or something, or what that looks like. But I think the key idea is this idea and the perception of those that are looking out for the little ones, right? So think about Isaiah 6. So Isaiah 6 is when Isaiah is called by God, and he gets to see this vision of God, right? And Isaiah is terrified because he knows that no one looks on the face of God and lives, and yet here's this image of God. And it's this kind of interesting, weird picture of God. But as part of that image, there are the angels that are around God, and they have 3 sets of wings. Now, one set covers their feet, and I'm not sure exactly what that means, but one set that they fly with, and then the third set covers their face. And I think the idea of the covering of the face is that they are not able to look on the presence of God either. That even the angels that are in heaven around God, they cover their face before God as well because of his holiness and how wonderful he is. And here Jesus is saying the angels that take care of those little ones, they don't have to cover their face before God. They're honored with him. And that's a beautiful image, right? And whether he's talking specifically about angels here or it's a figure again, and it's talking about those in general who take care of the little ones and seek them and protect them, the idea is that there's no separation between them and God. That is somebody who gets to look on the glory of God, who gets to stand before him with their face uncovered, because that's the way that God values these innocent ones, these small ones. And that, I think that's a beautiful image. So without getting into the whole angels of the little ones thing, which I don't have an answer for, so don't ask, I think that it's like a really beautiful image otherwise here. Kind of that idea of being able to stand before God without having to cover your face, that you are accepted fully, that's the thing. And it answers the question of who's the greatest a little bit as well, too. Yeah.
Well, in that passage, there is a gloss, probably, that occurred late in the Byzantine text type that tries to clarify. It was just pointed to me, Ramon, is that an explanation of the Son of Man comes to save the lost. It's kind of describing why he, and again, probably not there in the original, but that kind of is, probably the scribes were trying to clarify or explain what exactly that little passage meant. But anyway, it is interesting. The angels, do they have an angel or whatever? But that little gloss might clarify.
Right. Well, I think some Bibles actually leave verse 11 out even. So,
Yeah.
So I just skipped it. Anyway, so I think the focus and the key point there is that idea, though, the uncovering of the face before God. And I think Isaiah 6 kind of helps demonstrate that maybe a little bit too. So I think that's interesting. Any other thoughts about that? So I think we're familiar with the parable of the 99 and seeking the one that's lost. But he kind of builds on this again. So there's I want us to see kind of the connection through all this, right? So I think we could see all of this a little bit in the idea of who the greatest is. That there's a little bit of a continuation here, that this is all tied together. And so they want to know who the greatest is, and it's the humble and the meek and the innocent and the cast out, right? It's those that resist temptation, those that are willing to go to any length, to be as holy as they can before God. But it's also those that seek God and are found out as he goes to seek them. And this idea then of reconciliation, which coincidentally enough, I already told a story of reconciliation between two little girls at school. And I think that demonstrates a little bit of what we're going to read here in this next section. So verse 15, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Again, I say to you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I among them. And so I think we're familiar with this text. We use it kind of as a standard of dealing with reconciliation, right? But there's a couple interesting things here that I think are worth highlighting. What is the purpose of this process? What are you trying to do? What's the end goal of this whole, these steps?
Went back to a place you can't went back or it has to be offense or it has to be of the offense.
Right. Reconciliation, forgiveness, repentance. You want to achieve unity, right? And you want to achieve it through righteousness. I gave the example of the little kids at school. I mean, the first step is clear, right? And it's the hardest one, maybe. Somebody's done something to hurt your feelings, to upset you, sin against you, is the specific language. Is it easy to go to them alone and have a conversation with them for the purpose of reconciliation? Because what ends up happening in a lot of cases is even if we are willing to go to them, which we usually aren't, I don't think, but even if we are, it's typically with what kind of tone? They sinned against us, right? It's combative from the beginning. You need to apologize. It's not with the idea of some sort of reconciliation or redemption, of seeking the lost of the 100, right? Like, so there's this whole tenor to the context I think we need to have in our hearts and minds, that there's a purpose that Jesus has already established here, which is to seek the lost sheep. And that's the purpose. And so, if you try to have empathy and understanding in those situations, I think that can change the way that you approach, even if you are the one that's offended or been sinned against. Like, you're right? Like, I'm the righteous one. I did it the right way. You're the one that messed up. And so we have this combative language, and he makes it very clear they sinned against you, right? But then the next one, I think, is interesting, because we look at it and we say, okay, so now you get 2 or 3 people with you to go talk to the person. Now you're going to gang up on them, right? What is the true purpose of those 2 or 3 witnesses? What is their job? Like, let's say there's this disagreement or someone sinned against somebody else in church, and you are called as one of the 2 or 3 witnesses to go with the person who was sinned against to deal with this situation. What's your job? To mediate.
To be a witness.
To be a witness. Not to team up with the person that was sinned against to attack the person that did the sinning, right? Like, it's not like I'm going to get my gang together and we're going to go confront this guy. The very purpose of mediation and to witness is to be a participant and to see and observe. And to make sure that things are done honorably, that people are handling it appropriately, right? Because when somebody has sinned against somebody else and there's an offense there, what is the hardest thing to have as somebody who's involved in that situation? Objectivity, right? You see your perspective and the things that were done to you, and you want justice for yourself. And it's hard to see what the other person sees. And so you go and you confront them, and they disagree and they deny it and they get angry back. And now what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to get my boys to come with me and we're going to go take care of this. But that's not what he's talking about, is it? These are witnesses. These are people there to see and to hear the arguments to both sides and to help mediate so that there can be reconciliation, because the point is to bring back the lost sheep. Like, that's the goal. Like, that's the spirit of all this. And so it's easy to go through these steps, and I've seen it done, where people will try and go through these steps, but it's not for the purpose of reconciliation. It's way more combative than that. You sinned, you've got to fix it. Oh, you're not willing to address it with me? Then we're going to get together, we're going to team up against you. That's clearly not the purpose, right? He just talked about the sheep that are lost and the innocents and winning people back, and the whole purpose here is mediation and witnessing, to see what happened, to hear the arguments, to be involved, to help redeem people, to bring the lost one back. Like, that's the goal. Not for you to feel better because they have to come crawling before everybody else and show you justified as you puff out your chest because you were the one that was right. That's not the purpose. I mean, anybody who's been married, I think, can recognize the potential danger here, right, of a disagreement or an argument. And the opportunity, and you don't have to be married, that just becomes the cliche example, right? But the example of, you disagreed about something and you were proven right. So what do? Well, you want them to admit it, that you were right. Is that the healthiest thing to do in the moment, right? No, not because it is right or wrong, but because it's combative, right? And we're not talking about sin in that case. We're just talking about disagreement over the curtains or whatever it is, It's like the point is not to be right. The point is to redeem. The point is for forgiveness. The point is for redemption. Not that I was proven to be correct and they were proven to be wrong and now everybody knows it, right? There's a heart issue here that underlines it all. Yeah, were you going to say something, Rick? Yeah.
And it's interesting that all of this kind of is included with the person. So, you know, when we go to that, let's say we're the party being brought to the discussion. Okay, if we remember that, you know, God is around all of what we're trying to get accomplished.
Yeah.
Where they're really trying to help someone, you know, be able to comply with God's wish for them.
Yeah.
You know, reconcile.
Well, I mean, that's exactly right. And the way you jump to the end there, I think, is important, because that's the next step, right? Because what does he say in verse 18? Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. I don't think the point of that, well, let me rephrase. I think the point of that is to highlight the significance of what's happening, the seriousness of the way that you're to handle this situation. Like, you were to come together as 2 or 3 witnesses, and you were to come to an honorable conclusion, and you need to be careful about that. You need to take it seriously, because at the decision of 2 or 3 witnesses, right? Because under the old law, how many people did it take to stone somebody to death? 2 or 3 witnesses, right? Like, the whole idea is that it's on the basis of multiple witnesses, multiple people making the choice. That's where the judgment comes from. And because of that, you need to be aware that the judgment that you're making is the judgment that's going to exist. And particularly in the context of, if he refuses to listen, tell it to all the church. And if he refuses to listen to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile or tax collector. The result is that you're casting this guy out, which has eternal consequence, doesn't it? If you tell somebody who is worshiping with us and they stole somebody's purse, and we know that they stole it, we're pretty sure that they stole it. You go up to them and you talk to them, why did you steal my purse? I'd like my purse back. I'm like, I'm not going to give you your purse back. And then you get a couple people together and they come and they meet together and they're like, you really need to give them their purse back. I didn't steal the purse. It's like, no, you did steal the purse. No, I didn't. I don't have the purse. Yes, you did. You stole the purse. And because you're not going to do it, you need to come before the whole assembly. And they're like, I'm not going to do that because I didn't steal the purse. It's like, we know you stole the purse. You got to do it. So then it's like, you can't worship here anymore because you're stealing purses. You can't be a part of this group. What's the effect on that person who otherwise, supposedly, presumably, in this made-up scenario, was coming to church and participating in what was going on? You've now shunned them from the kingdom of heaven. You're not allowed to worship. You're not allowed to be here. We don't want you here. So what if you're wrong and they didn't steal the purse?
It's an obligation because we have to take into consideration that soul, and if we're responsible for that soul not coming back to worship, then God doesn't look kindly on that, and that's on us.
Right. And so there's a seriousness to the process, right? Heightened seriousness, particularly when it comes to assembly and worship and the kingdom and who we participate with. And so I think we need to see it in that context, right? In the way that he's saying that there. Yeah.
We had a situation years ago in a congregation we were in where one brother one brother brought it another brother. And so they went through this exact process properly. They got to the end, and the person just was not going to restore what he take or whatever took. But the person who brought the original charge, after thinking about it, decided he didn't want it to go further, and he forgave the thing anyway, so that the other person would be cast out. And I thought that was a huge, big thing for that person to do after the whole thing was done, to forgive the debt or whatever you would consider that, for the sake of the person's soul in the future. So
Right.
I thought that was kind of a good thing, to see the
Yeah.
process bear out to the end and yet have somebody be so loving and great about it that they decided to
Right.
pick up.
And it shows a heart and understanding of what this is really all about, right? Which is restoration, seeking the lost. And that's really the context of the whole chapter, right? So ask again, who's the greatest? I mean, the one who's willing to humble himself before another, right? To seek the lost and bring them in. The one who's willing to forgive an offense. The one who's willing to allow somebody else to glory over them, so to speak, right? Like the whole thing is wrapped up in that first question, right? And it isn't just about these examples, it's about the very nature of the kingdom as a whole. And this is what Jesus has been teaching from the beginning, what Matthew's been emphasizing from the beginning of the gospel. He's changing the world, and he's changing the value system that we see within the world. And he's changing the way that we should look at all these things. And we haven't gotten to the conclusion yet. And so it's difficult and it's hard, right, to like see this stuff and think about it. But we have the answer, right? Like we know where the story goes. And the reason why it's possible is because of Jesus' death and resurrection. And he's building towards that. And he's showing the way that the world is going to change because of that and the way that we should participate because of that. So it's kind of an amazing thing. So any other final thoughts, comments, questions before we finish up? Is that the second bell? First bell? First bell. 1 minute. And I thought the second bell rang. So I was doing my whole wrap up. Now we got to filibuster for one last minute because we got to get all the way to the end. We got to finish on time. But then I don't really have enough time to really get into a new point, because then I'll run over. And I guess I'll just stop. Appreciate you all's attention. We'll be in chapter 19 next week.